I never thought I'd be sitting here, at 55 years old, looking back on the last 3 decades of my life and realizing that everything I believed, everything I poured my heart into, was built on a lie. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is the truth, the kind of truth that guts you open, that leaves scars you never knew a human soul could carry. For so long, I lived in the shadow of a secret no one dared to tell me, and when it finally clawed its way out into the light, it destroyed the world I thought was mine. When I was 24, I held my son for the first time. At least, I thought he was my son. I remember the weight of him in my arms, tiny, fragile, yet impossibly heavy with the promise of a lifetime. He had this shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to search my face as if memorizing me. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my reason to live. I wasn't a woman of wealth or privilege. I had grown up in the small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, where secrets didn't stay buried for long, unless they were twisted so deeply into the roots of a family that even gossip couldn't unearth them. My childhood was scarred by an absent father, a mother who worked herself half to death, and an older sister who carried bitterness like a weapon. I swore that when I had children, I would love them so fiercely, so unconditionally, that they would never doubt their place in my heart, and I did. For 30 years, I raised that boy with everything I had. I gave up dreams, jobs, relationships. His father, well, his supposed father, was never much of a presence. He floated in and out, charming when he wanted to be, cruel when it suited him, and absent for most of it. But I told myself it was okay because my son had me. I could be enough. I had to be enough. The nights were the hardest in those early years. I would sit by his crib, rocking slowly, watching the shadows dance on the wall and whisper promises into the dark. I'll never leave you. I'll always fight for you. You are my whole world. Those weren't just words. They were blood oaths I carved into my own heart. He grew, and with every year my identity fused deeper with being his mother. I was no longer just me. I was his mom. The sacrifices piled up, but I didn't care. When money ran tight, I skipped meals so he could eat. When he wanted to join soccer but we couldn't afford the gear, I worked double shifts at the diner until my feet bled through my shoes. When he had nightmares, I was there, stroking his hair until he slept again. I gave him everything that had been missing from my own childhood, pouring love into every crack, every empty space I'd once carried inside me. But somewhere along the way, shadows began to creep in. Little things at first, comments from my sister about how he didn't really look like me. A strange tightness in my mother's face whenever she glanced at him. Even his father, during one of his drunken rages, once spat out, "You think he's yours?" I had screamed back, furious, dismissing it as another one of his cruel jabs meant to wound me. But the words clung to me like poison, settling somewhere deep, waiting. Still, I shoved it aside. I couldn't afford to believe anything else. To doubt my son's place in my life would have been like doubting my own existence. So I kept going. I raised him through scraped knees and school plays, heartbreaks, and graduations. When he walked across that high school stage, I cried so hard people thought I was hysterical. Maybe I was. I was so proud, so blinded by love that I couldn't see the storm building just beyond the horizon. The first real crack appeared when he was 20. We had a terrible fight, the kind that burns long after the words have been said. He was angry that I was always hovering, always needing to know where he was, who he was with. "You're not my keeper," he shouted, and then, with venom in his voice that cut me deeper than any blade, he added, "You're not even really my mom sometimes, the way you act." I laughed it off at the time, forced myself to, but inside something broke. Why would he say that? Why would those words even exist in his mind unless some seed had been planted long ago? Years passed. He built his own life, slowly drifting from mine the way children often do. It hurt, but I told myself it was natural. That's what good mothers do. They raise their children to fly. even if it means watching them soar away. But the distance grew colder, sharper. He stopped visiting as often. Phone calls went unanswered. Holidays felt emptier. I told myself not to take it personally, but late at night, staring at the ceiling, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. And then, on the cusp of his 30th birthday, the truth finally exploded. It came from my sister, of all people. We hadn't spoken in months, our relationship always brittle, always teetering between uneasy silence and outright hostility. She showed up at my door, uninvited, her face set in that smug mask she'd perfected since childhood. She dropped the words like a bomb. "He's not your son. You've been raising someone else's child all this time." I can still feel the way the floor tilted beneath me, the way my lungs refused to pull in air. My first instinct was rage, denial. I shoved her out of my house, screaming that she was jealous, cruel, hateful. But her words wouldn't stop echoing. They wormed into me, gnawed at me, kept me awake for weeks. I looked at my son differently, studying his face, his features, wondering if I'd been blind all these years. And the more I searched, the more I saw what I had spent decades refusing to see. He didn't look like me at all. He didn't carry my smile, my mother's eyes, or even his supposed father's temper. He was different. I tried to bury it, but the doubt was poison now, spreading through everything. I couldn't rest until I knew, and so, with trembling hands and a heart pounding so loudly I thought it might split, I bought a DNA kit. The day the results arrived, I sat in my kitchen staring at the envelope for hours. My hands shook as I tore it open. My eyes scanned the words over and over until they blurred. Probability of maternity, 0%. I thought I would scream. I thought I would collapse.
Instead, I sat there in silence, the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, until I realized I was crying. Not the kind of tears you wipe away, but the kind that pour out of you like your soul is bleeding.
30 years. 30 years of love, sacrifice, devotion, all built on a lie. I wanted to march straight to his father, demand answers, demand to know whose child I had spent my life raising. But he was gone, dead from liver failure years ago. The grave doesn't answer questions. My mother was gone too, and she had carried secrets to her coffin like treasures. That left only my sister, the one who had dropped this bomb into my life, and I knew she was savoring every second of my unraveling. But beneath the grief, something else was stirring. Rage. Not the hot, fleeting kind, but the deep, burning fury of a woman betrayed, of a life stolen. Someone had stolen my motherhood, my truth, and left me in the dark for 3 decades. Someone had looked me in the eyes as I held that baby, as I whispered promises to him, and let me live a lie. The need for revenge took root before I even knew it. I didn't want just answers. I wanted justice. For myself. For the woman I had been, young and naive, pouring her soul into a child she thought was her own. For the years I could never get back. But before I could strike, I had to uncover the whole truth. And what I found, piece by piece, was darker than anything I had ever imagined. The nights became unbearable after I learned the truth. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of the old house as if it were whispering all the secrets I had never been told. Every photo on the wall mocked me. The birthdays, the vacations, the graduations. Each frame that once made me proud now felt like a monument to betrayal. I wasn't sure what was real anymore. Had he ever really been mine? Or had I been nothing but a convenient fool, playing house with a child who didn't even belong to me? But I couldn't let despair be the end of my story. My heart throbbed with too many unanswered questions. Whose child had I raised? Who had stolen my motherhood from me? And why had no one told me the truth for all these years? My mother was gone. My son's father was gone. And I was left with only my sister, my sharp-tongued, cold-hearted sister, who relished watching me fall apart. So I went to her. It was late afternoon, the sky bruised with storm clouds when I knocked on her door. She opened it with that smug grin, like she had been expecting me all along. "Finally ready to talk?" she said, her voice dripping with triumph. I wanted to slap her, to scream until the walls shook, but I forced myself to stay calm. My voice came out low, steady, dangerous. "Tell me the truth, everything. Don't play games with me, not this time." Her eyes gleamed as she leaned against the doorway. "You really want to know?" "Tell me!" My voice cracked, the rage bubbling out despite my effort. She stepped aside and let me in. Her living room smelled of old coffee and cigarette smoke. She poured herself a drink before she spoke, savoring my agony. "You were so blind back then. So desperate to believe in love, in that good-for-nothing man of yours. You never saw what was happening right in front of you." My stomach nodded. "What are you talking about?" She smirked. "While you were busy working double shifts, your man was busy warming someone else's bed. And not just anyone, someone close, someone Mother swore we would never speak of." My knees weakened, but I held on. "Who?" Her silence stretched just long enough to twist the knife, and then she said it. "Our cousin, Marianne." The name hit me like a blow. Marianne, my mother's niece, the one who had always hovered around, too close to my family, too cozy with my ex. I remembered the way she used to smile at him, the way her hand lingered on his arm, a little too long. I had written it off as my imagination, insecurity whispering in my ear, but now the pieces snapped together in a grotesque puzzle. The child I had raised for 30 years was theirs. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. My sister laughed, a cruel, bitter sound. "Oh, don't look so shocked. Everyone knew. Everyone but you. Mother made sure of it, said you weren't strong enough to handle the truth. Better to let you play house than watch you crumble." Her words sliced through me, each one a betrayal I could taste in my mouth like iron. My own mother had known. My family had known. And they had let me waste my life believing a lie. I left my sister's house trembling, the storm breaking open above me, rain soaking me to the bone. I didn't care. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging inside. I wanted to burn it all down, the lies, the secrets, the smug looks on their faces. But my rage wasn't enough. I needed proof. I needed to look into Marianne's eyes and hear the truth from her lips. The next day, I drove to her house. She answered the door with surprise, her hair streaked with gray now, her face older but still holding that sly beauty she had wielded in her youth. When she saw me, her smile faltered. "What are you doing here?" I pushed past her, my voice shaking. "Tell me the truth, Marianne. Don't you dare lie to me. Is he your son? Is he yours and his?" Her eyes darted away, her hands trembling. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, but then her shoulders sagged, and she whispered, "Yes." The world tilted, my chest tightened, and I could barely breathe. I had imagined this moment 100 times in the last few days, but nothing prepared me for the crushing weight of hearing it confirmed. "You let me raise him!" I screamed, tears spilling down my face. "You let me love him, sacrifice for him, believe he was mine, all while you stood there, knowing the truth?" Marianne began to cry, her tears falling silently down her cheeks. "I was young. I was ashamed. Your mother said it was better this way. He needed stability. You loved him in a way I never could. I thought—" "You thought nothing!" I cut her off. "You stole from me. You stole 30 years of my life." The anger consumed me so completely that I could hardly see straight. Every wound, every sacrifice, every sleepless night. All of it had been stolen by her selfishness and my mother's cruelty. I stumbled out of her house, my vision blurred with tears. My hand shook on the steering wheel as I drove away. I wanted revenge more than I wanted breath. I wanted them to feel even a fraction of the agony I carried now. But there was one more person who needed to know the truth. My son. Or rather, the boy I thought was my son. For days, I wrestled with it. Should I tell him? Would it shatter him? Or would it free him to finally understand why he had always felt a strange distance between us? In the end, I couldn't keep the truth from him. Not when it had already destroyed me. He deserved to know who he really was, so I called him. My voice trembled as I asked him to come over. When he arrived, tall and broad-shouldered, with those same searching eyes I had once mistaken for mine, my heart broke all over again. I wanted to hold him, to cling to him, to never let him go. But I knew that after this, nothing would ever be the same. I sat him down at the kitchen table where so many of our memories had been made. Homework spread out, birthday cakes lit, arguments fought and resolved. And then, with tears streaming down my face, I told him everything. His face went pale. He didn't speak at first, just stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Finally, he whispered, "So, you're not my mom?" The words ripped through me. "I am your mom," I cried. "I raised you. I loved you. I gave you everything I had." Biology doesn't erase 30 years. But yes, the truth is, I didn't give birth to you. Marianne did. And your father, he was in on it. He pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the floor. His hands shook as he raked them through his hair. Why? Why would you even tell me this? Why now? Because you deserve the truth, I said, my voice breaking. I couldn't live with myself if I kept lying to you, the way they lied to me. I needed you to know. I needed you to hear it from me, not from anyone else. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, he said, "I need time." And then he walked out the door. I collapsed at the table, sobbing into my hands. The sound of the door slamming behind him echoed in my chest like a death knell. I had lost him. Maybe forever. But the fire inside me hadn't burned out yet. If my family thought they could bury me under lies and walk away unscathed, they were wrong. I was done being the quiet, naive woman who accepted betrayal as her fate. They had taken my motherhood, my peace, my very identity. Now, it was my turn to take something back. The days that followed were a blur of silence and rage. My house felt haunted. Every corner, every chair, every photograph seemed to whisper reminders of the life I thought I had, the son I thought was mine. I found myself staring at the empty chair at the kitchen table, the one he used to occupy, and I would break down all over again. I wondered if he would ever come back, if he would ever look me in the eye again, or if my confession had severed the last fragile thread holding us together. But grief has a way of fermenting into something darker. The longer I sat with the silence, the more the sorrow hardened into fury. They had stolen so much from me. My ex, my cousin Marianne, my own mother. Even my sister who had kept her cruel mouth shut until she could weaponize the truth. They had all stood by and let me live in ignorance while I poured every ounce of myself into a child who was never really mine. And so, I began to plan. My revenge wasn't born out of pettiness. It wasn't about slashing tires or screaming in the street. No, mine was quieter, sharper. I wanted them exposed. I wanted their carefully crafted facades to shatter in front of everyone they had ever fooled. If they had stolen 30 years of my life, I would steal the comfort of their lies. I started with Marianne. She lived her life pretending to be respectable, a woman of faith who attended church every Sunday, smiling sweetly in her pressed dresses. Everyone admired her, pitied her even, for never having married, for never having children. I wondered how many people in town suspected her truth, that she had indeed had a child, but stolen his existence from me, letting me carry the burden she abandoned. I gathered everything I could, Old letters, photographs, I even found an old diary in my attic, one my ex had kept when he was younger. Buried in the back between crude jokes and angry ramblings were words that made my blood run cold. Marianne is pregnant. She says she can't raise it. She wants to disappear, but she says her cousin can't know. Says she'll ruin everything if she finds out. The words blurred in my hands as my tears soaked the paper. Proof. He had known. He had been part of the plan from the beginning, and my mother, God, my own mother, had gone along with it, telling me the baby was mine, allowing me to believe in the miracle I had prayed for. They had all colluded to rob me blind. I copied those pages, sealed them in envelopes, and sent them out to the pastor of Marianne's church, to neighbors, even to old friends of the family. I didn't write my name. I didn't need to. The words spoke for themselves. Within a week, Marianne's reputation began to crumble. I saw her once at the grocery store, her hair unkempt, her eyes darting nervously as whispers followed her down the aisle. It wasn't enough to fix what she'd done to me, but it was something. A piece of her world cracking apart, just like mine had. But revenge is a dangerous fire. Once it starts burning, it's hard to control. My sister was next. She thought she held power over me, dangling the truth like a knife she could twist whenever she pleased. But I knew her secrets too. She had always despised me, jealous of the love people showed me, envious of the bond I once shared with my son. What people didn't know was that her own marriage was rotting from the inside. Her husband had left years ago because she was too cruel, too bitter, and she had lied about him working overseas to save face. I let it slip, carefully, strategically. A conversation at the hair salon, a comment on social media. By the time it spread through our small town, her pride was in tatters. People began to see her for what she really was, a lonely, spiteful woman who had built her life on lies, just like the rest of them. Still, even as I struck back at them, one by one, I couldn't quiet the ache inside me. My son. God, it hurt even to call him that anymore. Hadn't called since the day he walked out. I wondered what he thought of me now. Did he hate me for telling him the truth? Did he feel betrayed by me, the way I had felt betrayed by everyone else? Or was he searching for Marianne, trying to connect with the woman who had birthed him and then abandoned him to me? The not knowing was torture. One night, after weeks of silence, there was a knock at my door. My heart raced as I opened it, and there he was, older now, worn down by knowledge he never asked for, but still him, my boy. He didn't come in right away. He stood on the porch, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes heavy. Finally, he spoke. I met her. Marianne. The words cut through me, but I forced myself to nod. And? He sighed, running a hand over his face. She told me everything. About the affair, the pregnancy, how she couldn't handle it. She said, you saved me, that without you, I might have ended up in a system, or worse. His voice cracked. She said she's sorry, but that doesn't change anything. You're the one who raised me. You're the one who loved me. I don't know how to process any of this. Tears filled my eyes as I reached out, my hand trembling. You don't have to process it all at once. All I need you to know is that nothing changes how I feel about you. You will always be my son. Always. He hesitated, then stepped forward, and when he let me hold him, I broke. The sobs tore out of me, decades of love and pain pouring into that single embrace. For the first time since the truth came out, I felt whole again, if only for a moment. But healing is never simple. He told me he needed space, that he didn't know how much of a relationship he could give me right now. I nodded, even though it felt like my heart was being ripped out all over again. At least he came back. At least he still saw me. In the quiet that followed, I began to reflect on what revenge had really given me. Marianne was disgraced. My sister's pride was shattered, but none of it filled the emptiness inside. None of it gave me back the years I had lost or erased the betrayals carved into my soul. Revenge had tasted sweet at first, but it was hollow in the end, leaving me with nothing but ashes. And yet, I wasn't done, because there was still one ghost left to confront. my mother. Though she was gone, her presence loomed over everything. She had orchestrated it all, pulling the strings that shaped the course of my life. She had taken my choice, my truth, my motherhood. I couldn't scream at her anymore. I couldn't demand answers, but I could do something else. I went to her grave. It was a gray morning, the grass damp with dew, the sky heavy with clouds. I stood there staring at the cold stone with her name carved into it, and I let everything out. The grief, the fury, the betrayal. I screamed until my throat was raw. I cried until I could barely breathe. And then, when there was nothing left inside me but exhaustion, I whispered, "You may have stolen the truth from me, but you will never take away the love I gave him. That love is mine. You can't erase it." For the first time, I felt free. The path forward was uncertain. My son and I would have to rebuild, piece by fragile piece. Maybe we would never be what we once were. Maybe he would drift away again. But at least the lies were gone. At least we stood in the light of the truth, painful though it was. I had lost so much, but I still had myself. And I still had the knowledge that, no matter whose blood ran in his veins, I had been a mother in every way that mattered. And that, I realized, was the truest revenge of all. The weeks after confronting my mother's grave brought a strange kind of quiet. Not peace, no, I wasn't there yet, but a stillness, like the pause after a storm when the air is heavy with what's been broken and what can never be fixed. For the first time in decades, there were no more lies hanging over my head. The truth was ugly, cruel, and it had destroyed the life I thought I had, but at least it was real. And I could live with real, even if it left scars. My son kept his distance. Days stretched into weeks without a word, then weeks into months. I tried not to call too often, tried not to push. He needed space, and I had to respect that. But every time the phone rang, my heart leapt, hoping it was him. Every time I checked the mailbox, I imagined a letter from him, something to tell me that the bond between us wasn't gone forever. Most days, there was nothing. And that silence cut deeper than any betrayal. One night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a photo album I had made when he was 10. His gap-toothed smile, his first bike ride, the birthday cake I stayed up all night baking. I traced his little face with my fingertips and whispered, "You're mine. You'll always be mine." I didn't care what DNA said, what Marianne claimed, or what my mother had stolen from me. 30 years of love couldn't be erased, but I knew he was struggling. He was caught between two worlds, the truth of his blood and the truth of his life. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized he wasn't the only one carrying trauma. I was too. We were both victims of the same cruel secret, and maybe, just maybe, if I could show him that I wasn't broken, he wouldn't feel broken either. So I began to rebuild myself. I joined a support group for mothers who had lost children, not to death, but to estrangement. Listening to their stories was like hearing echoes of my own pain, betrayal, abandonment, guilt. Some had been cut off by their children for reasons they couldn't understand. Others were grappling with truths too heavy to carry. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I poured my pain into writing, filling journals with memories, questions, rants, prayers. Some nights I wrote letters to my son, letters I never mailed. I told him about the day he was born, or the day I believed he was born, about how I felt the first time he called me Mom, about how I would have walked through fire just to protect him. Writing became my therapy, my way of clawing my way back to myself. And then, one afternoon, as autumn leaves swirled outside my window, the phone rang. His name lit up on the screen. My hand shook as I answered. "Mom?" His voice was tentative, almost childlike. "Yes, baby," I whispered, my throat tightening. "Can I come over?" Those 4 words cracked something open inside me. "Of course," I said, my voice breaking. "Of course you can." When he arrived, he looked tired, older than his years, but still my boy. He sat at the table across from me, the same table where I had once confessed the truth, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked at me with eyes full of sorrow and said, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know who I am anymore." I reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. "You're you," I said softly. "That's all you need to be. And no matter what, you'll always be my son." He broke down then, tears streaming down his face, and I pulled him into my arms. We cried together, 2 broken souls clinging to each other in the wreckage of lies. It wasn't a perfect reunion, it wasn't a magical fix, but it was real, and for me, that was enough. In the weeks that followed, he came by more often. Sometimes we would talk, sometimes we just sat in silence. Other times we fought, about Marianne, about his father, about everything that had been stolen from us. But even in those fights, there was love. There was something to hold on to. Eventually, he told me he confronted Marianne again. She had tried to explain herself, to apologize, but he said it felt hollow. "She may have given birth to me," he said, "but she wasn't my mother. You were." Those words healed something inside me I hadn't realized was still bleeding. They were proof that love, real love, could outlast even the cruelest betrayals. But forgiveness didn't come easily. Not for Marianne, not for my mother, not even for myself. For months I wrestled with it, torn between rage and the desire to let go. Revenge had given me temporary satisfaction, but it hadn't set me free. Carrying anger felt like carrying chains. One evening, as I sat watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that revenge had already done its work. The truth had been dragged into the light. The liars had been exposed. My mother's legacy of control had been shattered. Marianne's carefully constructed image had crumbled. My sister's bitterness had been revealed. I didn't need to punish them anymore. Life had already done that. What I needed now was to choose myself, to stop letting their choices define me, to stop measuring my worth by the lies that had been forced on me. And so I began to forgive, not for them, but for me. I whispered forgiveness at my mother's grave, not because she deserved it, but because I refused to carry her poison any longer. I forgave Marianne, not because she had earned it, but because her shame was punishment enough. I even forgave my sister, in the quiet of my heart, knowing she would never change. Forgiveness didn't erase the pain. It didn't give me back the years I had lost, but it loosened the chains around my heart. It gave me room to breathe. The final piece came months later, when my son stood in my living room, holding his newborn baby girl in his arms. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I want her to know you as a grandmother. Because you're the best mother I could have ever had." I broke down then, holding that tiny life, feeling the weight of everything I had lost and everything I had regained. The cycle of betrayal had ended. A new story was beginning, one built not on lies, but on truth, love, and resilience. As I sit here now, telling you my story, I realize that revenge was never the true ending. The real victory was survival. The real justice was refusing to let their lies define me. And the real triumph was love, the kind that endures, even when blood and truth try to rip it apart. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. We cannot choose the betrayals we face, but we can choose how we rise from them. We can let the lies destroy us, or we can carve strength from the ruins. I was betrayed by the people I trusted most. I was robbed of 30 years of truth. but I am still standing. And the love I gave, the love I still give, will outlive every lie that tried to bury me. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your own stories of betrayal, survival, or forgiveness. We are never as alone as we think we are.